rumor going on out there, or should I say a suggestion, that somehow digital currency is going to equate to the end of the US dollar. You hear that sort of all over the place these days. Furthermore, and what also seems to be going hand in hand with that discussion is that those BRIC countries that include Russia, China, India, Brazil, they're sort of consorting about to find ways to effectively just replace the dollar and end its reign as the world's reserve currency. There's sort of two different issues there, but we're going to try and unpack them both here on the program in this segment. So welcome on in to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. Make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast or even on our YouTube channel. We've got a lot of programs out there in our inventory that cover a wide range of topics. So if you have any trouble finding us on your favorite platform, go to our website, Nelson Financial Planning. Make sure you click on those icons that you'll see on the website, and then that gets you automatically connected to our channels. Once there, please subscribe, because then you know when you'll get updates and notifications of when we post new material on those various platforms. So my name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, a certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning. So what's this all about, right? To talk of digital currency first, I guess my reaction when I hear people talking about that is, well, isn't the cat kind of out of the bag already on that? I mean, think of how often we use credit cards, how often we use debit cards. And now, over the course of the past few years, there's been a proliferation of cash apps, whether it's Venmo or whether it's Zelle or whatever the case may be. It's very easy to send money from one person to another, and they don't even have to be next to each other. They don't have to be in the same state. I mean, the reality is that certainly when you think about younger generations, very rare for them to really even use cash, right? In a very informal survey, I surveyed my three boys in college, and I was like, when was the last time you hit up an ATM? And the answer is not this semester. So the reality is that digital currency is certainly here to stay. It's not going to change. But I think the thing that we forget is, in the past, when we wanted to exchange money and we wanted to exchange cash, right, I would hand you basically what was a piece of paper, right? And on that piece of paper was a picture of a dead president and usually like a number, like if it was a $20 bill and there was 20 on it, it was $50 bill, was 50 on it. Now, instead of sort of handing you that piece of paper with the president pictures on it and the number on it, I just tap my phone or I hit a button on an app and off it goes. Anywhere in the world, you don't have to be next to me to receive that piece of paper. Instead, it's just an application. But underlying that is that level of faith or level of trust, if you will, that backs the U.S. dollar by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. When you look at a printed dollar bill, or $20 or $50 or whatever the case may be, you will see that there's a name on it that says that it is a Federal Reserve note. Well, what's a note? A note, after all, by definition, is a promise to pay. So when you have a $20 bill in your possession, what you have is a promise to pay by the Federal Reserve the equivalent of 20 US dollars. It's a promise that's pretty good. Ultimately, digital currency would operate on sort of the same premise, right? If I send someone $100 through Venmo or Zelle or whatever the case may be, it's kind of the same thing. The reality is that instead of giving you a piece of paper, like before when I would hand you a $20 bill, then I'm giving you a digital certificate. They still represent the same thing. I mean, and I think that's the important thing. It still represents the same thing. It's still U.S. dollar. So whether the dollar is printed on a piece of paper with a dead president and a number on it, or whether it's certified through a digital certificate of transferring money from me to you, it's still U.S. dollars. There's no suggestion, the notion that you're replacing the U.S. dollar with, say, wampum is just doesn't really get there, because just as sending money on a Cash App is the U.S. dollar, so too would the digital dollar be. The only difference is that it's no longer printed. So that's really kind of where that discussion is. And the cat's clearly out of the bag on that one. We're not going back to that. The reality is that instead of exchanging pieces of paper, we're exchanging digital certificates, both of which effectively still mean the same thing. That's still the U.S. dollar. That's not just something different, than they're not going to go in and replace it with wampum or something like that, because the reality is that the paper represents the dollar, the digital certificate represents the dollar. So where this conversation, I think, sort of starts to go off the rails a little bit is it seems to suggest that this is going to spell the end of the U.S. dollar. And it sort of ignores sort of the current reality, or the reality of the current usage that's effectively already here. But it also seems to suggest that somehow then that means of exchange is going to be a means of exchange for something that's other than the U.S. dollar. And that argument just completely ignores the fact that the U.S. dollar still is and remains very much in the strongest position as the world's reserve currency, because the suggestion that its usage or prevalence is somehow in decline sort of ignores current trends and positions. First, if you think about foreign exchange markets, where currencies are traded back and forth, the U.S. dollar is involved in nearly 90% of all transactions. Most recently, over the past 10-year period, the dollar accounted for 96% of trade invoicing in the Americas, 74% in Asia Pacific, and 79% in the rest of the world. I ask you, does that sound like a currency usage that is in decline? We would argue no. Second, consider what our Federal Reserve just did during the course of the most recent global crisis, that being the pandemic, especially in comparison to what they did previously in the prior global financial crisis. In 2008, 2009, the Federal Reserve stopped short of backstopping foreign denominated assets, bonds, etc. In 2020, during the COVID shutdown, Federal Reserve did just that, went much further in terms of the types of assets that it would backstop versus what it did even in what we would submit as was a much more dramatic financial crisis during 2008, 2009. The fact that it went even further in 2020 than it did in 2008, 2009, in our view, continues to secure or cement the position that truly the U.S. dollar is the world's dominant currency, its reserve currency, especially when you think about, well, just in recent history, it went further than what it did previously in terms of backstopping foreign denominated bonds. But so again, relative position, okay? And so that certainly, when you think about the statistics, it doesn't appear that it is a currency on its way out or in decline. In fact, if you think about what the Federal Reserve did, you could certainly strongly argue that it is actually more powerful than ever before. Now, the next part of the conversation has to do with the BRIC stuff, okay? Consider, first of all, that hill that they have to climb. 80% of all global transactions denominated in U.S. dollars. Set that aside, and everybody seems to do when they're having this argument. Let's talk for a minute about a couple of those folks. Russia, China. Last check, authoritarian governments at best. Some might effectively argue a dictatorship. When you think about that from a business perspective, you're not going to engage in currency that's subject to that kind of uncertainty. And that's where the argument really falls apart. We're going to take a break and kind of finish up that concept here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning.